So if you've been with GMAT Club Spotlight all day long, then you probably know that we are using the Q&A tab on the window to be able to enter any questions that you might have. And we'll use the chat for maybe some more simple things. If you have any issues or questions or like issues, let's put them there in the chat, or you can tell me where you're from. I'm very excited to meet everyone. And then in the Q&A, that's the tab I'm going to be monitoring throughout the presentation and try to answer all of your questions that's related to this. But beyond that, if you guys do have questions, I'll have my contact information at the end, and you can, if your question doesn't get answered, it'll be there. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. So excited to see everybody here. Definitely post where you're tuning in from. Bangalore, Lucknow. It's so exciting. Okay, I'll jump in just because I have a habit of running over on time. So I'm going to try to keep myself on track today. So I'm Jen T with Aringo, and today we're going to be talking about the power of conversations before you start your application. And some of you may have thought about this and thinking, oh, like, how am I supposed to get to know all these schools, and how am I supposed to know if they're the right fit for me? And that's what we're going to talk about today. So before we get started, I'll give you a little bit more information about me. I'm Jen T. I'm the CEO of Aringo MBA Admissions Consulting, and we have been around for about 20 years, and I've been in the industry for 10 years. And we are an MBA admissions consulting firm, and we help you with formulating your strategy, determining which stories are going to be most important, helping address any questions that the admissions committee might have about your profile. And then we will also help you with refining your essays, your videos, your org charts, whatever might be involved in the application, and help you prepare for your interview, and then hopefully negotiate scholarship or potentially help with navigating the wait list. So that's what we do. And so we work with about 200 students every year and have helped over 4,000 students get into top MBA programs across the globe. And you can always check our stats on our website, aringo.com. All right. So today we are going to be talking about these conversations, and I'm going to break it down into kind of three different categories. One is going to be talking to the admissions committees, talking to current students, and then alumni. And the bigger thing of all of this is while you're doing these conversations and research, make sure you take your notes, because if you're not applying until like fall 26 or in the future, then you want to make sure that you can go back and reference these notes, because you're going to use them, or you should use them. And so we'll make sure that we can incorporate this into your essays and show the school the research that you've done, again, so that they can see that this is the right place for you. All right, before we move to the next page, we'll see somebody wants to know about evaluating transcripts for free of charge. I don't know an organization that does that officially for free of charge. Usually a lot of organizations like WES or WES do the evaluations, and they usually do charge. I'm sorry, I don't know any organization that does it for free, but not all schools require it. So, depending on if the school does, then you'll have to order them. And if not, then you don't have to. All right, Wang, you want to know what makes for a successful admit to top tier MBA programs in the US? Is it only the essay prompt, CV, GMAT, GRE, the GPA, or is there some defined value add factor that the candidate will likely offer to the MBA cohort and preempted by the graduate outcomes? Okay, so I think you already know the answer to this then. If you've been paying attention to these presentations, all of the schools right now, all the admissions committees are curating an MBA cohort. And so they want to make sure, one, that you have the aptitude to be at the level of their curriculum. So that's your GPA, your GMAT, GRE scores, etc. But then they also want to make sure that, one, you're coming from the right industry, to make sure that they can see, we have the right kind of curriculum to help you get where you want to go. And that's for your short term and your long term goals. And so each one of these schools have some niches. So they'll have different types of concentrations or certificates, um, those type of or focus areas, depending on what the school wants to call it. But there are some areas that you can really focus on during the MBA while you also get your general MBA education. And it's going to be able to give you some more definition to your career as you move on from the MBA program. So they are going to be looking for people who have experience that's good to share, that's, I would say, rare or not as common. So think about that when you evaluate your profile of, what's different about me? What have I done that not many other people have done? And one that like gets missed all the time is family business. And MBA programs love when a candidate has worked in a family business, whether that's, pre MBA or pre college, depending on where it is in life. But, they really do enjoy being able to see that you've had a vested interest in the success of the company. And so you'll see that that comes up as a high ranking attribute for candidates. But beyond that, they want to make sure that you're a good fit for their cohort and everything that they have to offer and that you're going to fit in. So that's what these schools are looking for. And it leads right into what these conversations are going to be all about. So, how do you get in touch with these special audiences? So, you can speak with AdComs by attending events like the MBA Spotlight or MBA fairs. So, MBA fairs typically are in major cities around many popular countries. You may have to travel a little bit, but if you sign up for a specific school on their information, like um, if you get in on their email list, they will usually help you with like saying like, oh, we're going to be in your area, come visit us. I know that I've signed up for a lot of them. They're like, oh, we're going to be Atlanta next week, and so come and meet us. And so those are definitely very helpful for making sure you're getting in contact with them. But beyond that, admissions committees will be hosting information sessions online most of the time. So you don't have to go to the school and visit them to be able to get the inside information about what the program is about, the curriculum. You can do this virtually. And I think that a lot of people have realized that since COVID, that you can absolutely do this from afar. You don't have to visit in person. But it does mean that you need to do your research to say, yes, I've never been to Boston, but I know that MIT is the right place for me because of X, Y, and Z. So you want to be able to attend those webinars, and the webinars could actually be with admissions committees, but they can also be with current students as well as alumni. So you can always look out for those specialized um, webinars that they're going to have. Then current students, so we're going to talk about how to reach out to them. What do you need to say? And then we're going to talk about reaching out to alumni and how you can find them. And then, again, what to say to them. So I kind of preemptively already talked about admissions committees and what they have to do and what they kind of offer. You can find their contact information typically online. Now, some MBA programs are going to keep things kind of at like a, surface level. They're going to give you some sort of, what do we call it? Gatekeeping. And so they're going to have a generic email address that you're going to email and say, hey, like, I'm really interested in your school and I would love to get to know more information. And then from there, they will route your email to the appropriate person and likely put you on the email list. But if you are, wanting to get more information, those information sessions are absolutely the right place. And then the next step is to email the person who presented and say like, oh man, April, I really loved your session about, and I'm just going to make this up, but I loved your session from Aringo, and I want to follow up and let you know that this is definitely one of my top schools, and I can't wait to learn more. And so you can, kind of give them that kind of email, and you can also ask a question. And that usually opens the door to bigger, better conversations. So the other things that you can do when you're talking to them is to kind of find out what they're looking for in a candidate. You have the ability to ask these questions candidly. They are not going to put it in your admissions file. I think that that's the biggest misnomer, is that people think that you can't talk to the admissions committee. The admissions committee is off limits, and that you're going to say something silly or stupid and that it's going to get put in your file and they're never going to let you be in there, like, and get admitted. But the truth is that really nothing really goes into your file. They do have a CRM. Sorry, have a runny nose today. So they have a CRM file that they will be keeping, and it really is much more of like touch points of, how many emails or how many events have they gone to, or what's their area of interest. But it's not the nitty gritty of like, oh, they used the wrong there in in an email to, an admissions committee person. They're not going to get down into that. So don't get too hung up on it. They're not going to put anything into the final packet that the admissions team will be reviewing for admission until you have submitted your entire application. And that's the materials that they're going to take. So don't be worried about having those conversations or feeling silly asking questions. So, yep, the biggest thing is that when you do talk to them, make sure that you don't ask questions that are on the website. I think that that's the biggest tip I can give anyone, is don't ask a question that you could easily find on the website. Now, if you're at an MBA fair and you've never heard of that school, and say like, "Oh wow, I, you know, I just heard of your school and I'm really interested. Can you tell me more?" That's okay. So, okay, so let's see if there's any other questions that are relevant to what we're talking about now. Okay, so says, is it a good thing to ask the ground status of recruiting in particular industries during conversations from current students when I can see the employment reports and get a general idea of the website? Absolutely. So that's our next slide, is we're going to be talking about conversations with students. So, oops, sorry. Here is an example of kind of where you can find webinars that these admissions committees are going to be hosting. So you can easily go online, look up the events that they're having. Okay, so here's how we're going to reach out to students. And this is like the number one way, is not LinkedIn, not cold calling them. I have like so many people say like, oh, like I reached out to 10 people from each one of these schools and only one school has people responding to me. And that's because they're getting bombarded on LinkedIn and it's a cold call. So you want to try to think of ways to connect with somebody from that school that gives you a connection or a reason for them to be compelled to reply to you. And so the way that I usually say that is by looking at their actual like student-led events and webinars, but then also looking at the clubs and activities. If there's a specific club that you're interested in joining, whether that's the consulting club, the net impact club, when you go on and log into their, well, you don't have to log in, so it's not gatekeeping there. But when you go onto the site and you look at the student orgs, typically they'll either have a generic email address that'll go to the club presidents, or they'll actually have member email addresses. And so you can email them and say, hey, I'm Jen. I'm looking to apply for the fall 25 start. I'm working on my application, but I had some questions because I'm interested in consulting, but want to get some more information. And so this is where you can also say is like, I can see that the school is really great at recruiting for Mackenzie, but I wanted to know with the current layoffs and everything that's going on, how are internships going and maybe job offers for second year students, and see if you have any insight to share with me. And that's going to open this door where the student's going to say, oh, these are questions I can answer. I'm not going to go and get on a call with somebody that has no direction. I'm going to actually be able to answer these questions. And, the other thing that I sometimes tell people is to say, if you're too busy, here are a few of the top questions that I have that I would love to have you answer. And that way you're giving them this option of, if you can't talk right now because things are really busy with, quarterly exams, internships, recruiting, whatever it is, like ultimately I want to find out this information and I think you're a great source. So you can do it that way. The other option is to look for ambassadors. So most schools will have an ambassador program, and they try to get a well-rounded group representing many different parts of industry sectors, nationalities, demographics, etc. And so that could be your in for connecting with somebody specifically, is like, I see that you're also from North America or wherever country you're from, and I'm looking to find out what the experience is like, at LBS for Americans, or at HEC, right? And so this is your opportunity to build that connection as well. And so these are the two main areas. Beyond that, you can always see if the admissions committee has any students to connect you with. So you could, if you have a connection with an admissions person, you can say, hey, I've been trying to find somebody who has a background in finance that wants to move more in the fintech direction. Do you have anybody specific that you can either connect me with or give me their contact information so I can reach out? And so this is, the best way to get a hold of these students. And so you can look on their website. This is an example of Wharton, and you can look at their clubs and activities that they have, and go ahead and break them down. So they have them typically broken down by like industry type or like job type focus of clubs, social clubs, nonprofit or volunteer activities. And so it's really exciting because it makes it a little bit easier for you to navigate in determining which clubs are going to be most important to you. But don't feel like you have to be always so job oriented. If there's something that's really exciting to you about that school, then and that kind of camaraderie and things like that. So you can find a different organization that's more about, social activities. A lot of these schools have like wine tasting or foodie clubs. So don't be afraid to look for those types of things and be able to reference them in your application, because the school wants you to, like we kind of mentioned earlier, be a part of this program more than just academics. All right. So moving on, you will see here's where I did a deep dive on the club leadership team, so you can see the club presidents. And so if their email is not presented on the website, at least they have a name, and then you can go to LinkedIn and look for them. So that's one example of how to do this. All right. So before we move on to alumni, let's see if we have any other questions I can answer that are relevant. Um, Pulimi has a question about how can I highlight my gap year? An AdCom officer mentioned adding some certified courses in line with my MBA program of my choice. Do you have any other tips on leveraging this? So I will say that I don't have a lot of context to be able to answer this specifically. Um, when we talk about a gap year, it depends on what this even means, because if you had a gap because of employment, or if you took a gap year from between college and starting your career, then that could be, or a, a gap year before you started college, depending on what it is. Then you definitely want to talk about it if it's considered a gap in your employment. If it's a gap before education, before you start your degree or right after, that could be a different thing, like depending on what the motivation was. Did you spend 6 months volunteering, helping at an orphanage in Costa Rica or somewhere? Then you can definitely put that in your extracurriculars or use it as part of your essays, as far as what's motivating you. So again, pull me, like, if you have further questions, we can always discuss that offline, and make sure that we get that all answered. Okay, so next question. How can we best toe the line between sharing our accomplishments without seeming to brag throughout the application process? So this is a great question, because and this question is coming from Sandra. So, Sandra, especially as females, we tend to minimalize our accomplishments. And whereas our male counterparts usually are more boisterous about it, you definitely want to brag about it. And there's ways to do it factually, right? Like when you go to write your bullet point about your experience in your resume, facts or facts and numbers can absolutely back this up, and make sure that you are, telling them what happened and highlighting the success that you had. So I think that where people may get lost is if they were part of a team and maybe lost that element of like saying, like, the team and I decided to do this. I specifically worked on this area and I was able to generate X number of dollars for our club. But I absolutely think that it's better for you to be a little bit more boisterous than you typically would, because again, you want to stand out of the crowd, but not be cocky, if that makes sense. Okay, so you have another question about is okay, yeah, asking about the ground status of recruiting. We kind of talked about that. I think I answered it all, but if you have more questions, let me know. Um, Becky, how is it possible to evaluate my transcripts free of charge? We already went over that one. How can I highlight? I think I'm going backwards now. Okay. All right. I think that we have answered all the questions. If you didn't get them answered, you can always upvote them and bring them up higher in the conversation. Phasia has a question about how much it costs for professional help. And I think that it depends. There's a lot of MBA admissions consulting firms out there, not just Aringo. And all of us have different pricing structures and structures of how we help candidates. So we can, talk about this offline, but you can get help on an hourly basis or get like what's called comprehensive assistance that costs a little bit more, but you don't have to really worry that something isn't covered or that you're missing something. So it all kind of depends on how much you feel like you have and like how prepared you feel going into this process. All right. So now let's talk about alumni. So, how do you reach out to alumni? Well, obviously LinkedIn is like the place, right? Like everybody's like, oh my gosh, I got to look at LinkedIn. But see if you have any in with them. Like think about anybody who maybe you graduated with, your batchmates, any connections you might have through your company. If you work for MNC, like there could be some connections that you can make, your boss can make, or maybe somebody else, and see, who do you know that graduated from that school? And I think that it could be very easy to kind of crowdsource this and say, hey, I'm applying to MBA programs. Does anybody in my network know somebody who graduated from an M7? And then hopefully they can connect you. I think that a lot of people get very focused on detective work and being able to manipulate the different advanced search populations. And sometimes it doesn't even have to be that complicated. So that could be one of the simplest ways is just putting out there to your network and asking them if they have any connections of students who went, of connections that went to these schools and see what happens. And then from there, you could also look at what the school is doing to connect you with alumni. And so they typically try to host an alumni talk um, every couple of every couple of months. And so this one I believe is also from Wharton, and they had somebody coming to do a coffee chat, and you sign up, and I think that they usually probably allow like 5 to 10 people. It's usually pretty small so that people can ask their questions and people can actually share their stories. But I mean, number one thing that you should do when you talk to an alumni is to ask them about their experience. That's why they're here, that's why they're volunteering, is because they loved their time at this school and they want to share that love with you. So absolutely ask them about their experience, what their favorite thing was, things, advice for preparing for this, experience. And then even like talking about their career path. So you could say, like, how did you, like, what concentration did you choose? And then how did you get your internship and your job? And then since you graduated, how's your career progressed? And how have you used the Wharton network to get to that next step? And so I think those kind of questions become the most relevant. And hopefully you can reference these answers in your application. Again, like that's the important part is, taking notes so that you can refer back to it whenever you go to write your application. All right. And you can always ask them, how do you stand out? Especially if the school has alumni do interviews. A lot of the times, those alumni have a rubric, and even students, right? And so some students, if they're current students, they probably aren't going to give you the inside information. But, you know, as an alumni, when you're doing the interview, they might say, like, on a scale of 1 to 5, how do you rate X, Y, and Z? And so they can tell you what the admissions committee is looking for them to evaluate in those conversations. And so they can give you, this idea of how you should highlight your experience when it comes to your actual application. All right. So I started making a tracker a couple of years ago. Like, I had a couple of my clients who were like, okay, like, what am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to do this? And so I created this tracker, and I'm happy to share it with anybody. If you email me, I'm happy to send this over to you. It is a simple Excel spreadsheet. So don't get like too excited. It's not high tech AI or anything like that. But what I've done is you kind of take each one of the tabs in the spreadsheet and divide it into each one of the schools that you're going to be applying to, and then you can kind of divide it into, well, anyways, there's a lot of ways to do this, but you can kind of talk about who you spoke with, what you learned, and kind of reference points, and then contacts, right? Like, so I learned about um, the foodie club from Joe Smith at Wharton, and that through the foodie club, he was actually able to get a product management job at a manufacturer, like a food manufacturer or something like that, right? Like, this really weird connection and a cool story, so that later on, when you go to write your essays, you say, in speaking with, like, I'm really excited about the tight knit network and opportunities that come from it. When speaking with John Smith, he shared that through the student clubs, he was able to get his job as a product manager at XYZ company. And I really look forward to making those connections on my own for my future. So this is like the way to incorporate what you've learned. I would say that you don't necessarily need to incorporate what you've learned from admissions committee members, because typically it's going to be, something that is pretty generic or more typical of every program. Um, but if you have a personal one-on-one conversation and it really feels like it resonates, and you have a good opportunity for like fitting it into your essays, then absolutely go for it. But for the most point, you're going to want to reference talking to students and alumni throughout your application to reinforce that these are the reasons I want to go to this school. Okay, I'm going to slow down for a second and see if there's any unanswered questions. And then if you guys want to, make sure to use the Q&A tab to post questions that you have that I haven't answered yet. Um, okay, so a new one from Rodrigo. What is the best way to mention in my MBA essays that I visited the business school and did prior networking? Is it beneficial to include the names of the people I spoke with? So, depending on the school, sometimes they'll even ask you, who have you spoken with, or what events have you attended for Columbia, right? Like, Columbia is like a big one like that. INSEAD is also like that. So, there's a space sometimes for you to put it in the application. If there's not a space, you absolutely take the time to figure out how to fit it into the essays. But you do want to mention this, because it's like, it can be as easy as, when I was on campus last spring, I learned about this concentration, right? Like, in these like few words, when I was on campus last year, last spring, 3 years ago, whatever it might have been, I was able to connect with Ben Rogers and learn about X, Y, and Z. So you want to be able to blend it in. It doesn't have to be like an overly crazy essay that gets so involved about, I really enjoyed walking along the snow dusted trails in downtown Boston. It was so historic, and I really enjoyed da 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 da, right? Like, it doesn't have to be that romantic. You can be very easy, clue the committee into the fact that you visited campus, And I think that's a really big thing because it is rare and you don't have to do that these days. And so awesome. Definitely keep it in there. And then the people that you talk to. For the most part, anyone that you reference from an MBA program is going to have a positive association. And even like the admissions committee members who are there year after year, likely they know who you're talking about and can remember what it was about that person that made them exciting or what they heard about them as they completed the program, those types of things. And so it should all be fond memories and you don't have to really worry too much about like, oh wow, you don't want anybody associated with that guy. So you should be pretty good about anybody you make connections with. Hopefully that helped Rodrigo. Okay, so we are at the Q&A session part of the day. I feel like I've kind of it it's simple enough, but definitely great information and somewhat repetitive between the different groups. But you guys are welcome to sign up to get a free profile evaluation with me. I have the link here. I will try to post it in the chat while you guys have some more time to post any questions you might have. And then, yeah, let's see if I can post this. I'll post it in the chat maybe. Okay, here we go. Yay. And then that's not what I meant to do. Okay. I don't know. I'm stuck for a second. Okay. Here we go. Yay. Okay. So the evaluation link is here. Yay. Feel free to sign up for that. But from now, like until we end for today, I'm here to answer your questions. If they don't get answered or you have something more in depth that's really specific to you, please feel free to email me. All right. So I will get started on this. Okay, so let's see. I think, oh, I'm in the chat. So sorry about that. Okay. Well, let's go to unanswered. I don't think that changed anything though. Um, Ground status on recruiting. Best way to mention MBA essays. Is it possible to evaluate my transcripts free? Highlight your gap year. Important to keep the record names. Yes. Is a good idea to speak to professors. Oh, this is a good one. Sandra, you asked about talking to professors in areas of focus. I think that's an absolute like amazing idea because most of the time when people reference curriculum, it is a little bit generic, right? Like you're like, I'm really excited about the quantum physics course. Um, right? Who's excited about that? But you can talk like more about like what that class is going to do for you or how you can leverage that class to get to that next level of connecting the human element to the fintech world or user design or um, the startup garage or the labs, and be able to talk about like you're excited to learn from a specific professor that you've met, or anything like that. I think it's great to talk about professors as well because obviously that's a big part of the program. What about reaching out to the AdCom in case of reapplication? Can we look for any feedback regarding our profile, test scores, interview performance? So I wish that there was a crystal ball and that schools would offer this, but for the most part, admissions committees are going to toe the line of, we really wish that we could provide feedback to everybody who was not admitted, but unfortunately, due to the volume, we cannot do this. What we recommend is that you take a look at your profile and compare it to the class profile of the students that are admitted this cycle. So right? So that reflection probably won't be able to happen until like June or July. And you're like, but I already want to write my application. So this is the time where you should see what maybe is missing. You can um, you can reach out to your interviewer maybe, and I mean try to make it as nice as possible. You don't want them to think that you think that they were the reason you didn't get in, but just like, hey, I just wanted to give you an update. Unfortunately, I wasn't admitted. I would love any feedback that you have for my reapplication. I wouldn't do that to students because, like, if a student interviewed you, I wouldn't ask them because I think like that goes against the whole principle of having students do the interviews and not have to have any repercussions because they want them to be involved, but they don't want them to feel responsible. You can always ask an admissions committee for answers, but likely they won't give them to you. I know that if you are on the wait list, there are some schools that will provide some feedback. Like I know some people who are on the wait list at Cornell right now, and Cornell has you do some self introspection about you and your application and everything. And then they have you come up with an action plan, and then from there, you might get some more personal interaction or some recommendations about course correction for, well, actually, the committee needs a little bit more on this. So, yeah, so that's one way for reapplication. I say, it's, I don't want to like plug me and be all salesy, but I would say that getting some professional assistance in reapplication can be quite helpful because usually we can see where somebody maybe missed the mark and how you can change that and not feel like you're submitting a completely different personality the next year. Um, and feel like everything makes sense of who you are and what you're wanting to present to the committee. Okay, so I think we have about 10 minutes left. So I think we've done all of the questions. Oh, okay. So Nathan, okay, that's cool. I see in the chat that somebody did some assistance there. Okay, so any other unanswered questions? I'm trying to flip through here. How much does it cost? Da, da, da. Okay, I think I've answered all of the questions that are currently in the Q&A box. Beyond that, this is a really exciting moment to apply to an MBA program, but it's also daunting, right? You've got to do some self evaluation and be able to understand like, this is where I've been and where I want to go. And this is why these specific schools are on my list. And you should be able to give some reasons that are beyond it's an Ivy League, it's M7. The reputation of the school that could kind of be there. It just depends. It's like the reputation within the tech, space or the product space or whatever it is. Maybe that can kind of work. But you really want to do your research on these schools and make sure that they fit what you're looking for and having these conversations with students, alumni, admissions committee members. That's where you're going to get the good stuff. Because every school is going to have a somewhat similar curriculum. Every school is going to have some sort of clubs and activities as well as having um, like connections and in employment post grad. But you want to look at the employment report, and then, like you said, like somebody asked, yeah, absolutely. I highly recommend it, especially when there's a specific industry that maybe has a downturn. I like say like the best thing to do is to reach out somebody who's on campus and say like, hey, I want to know how recruiting is. I heard that like there's a lot of layoffs with, I keep saying consulting, or like in the tech world. I want to know what it's like for internship options as well as for jobs for current students. And they're going to give you that answer. And then you could say, not only do I want to know about this, but what are some alternatives to the most popular brands? Like if you want to do, back in my day, we called it FANG, but if you're interested in Amazon, Apple, any of those big names, but yet they're kind of on not really hiring, what are the ones that are starting to hire more MBA grads that they know about? So, okay. One, yes. So, I think a lot of people saw BB's email about applications skyrocketing this year. And I would say that, the biggest thing is to try to stand out. So Juan Pablo's question was, should we factor that in somehow in the pre-application conversation? Perhaps this year, these engagements are even more important to stand out in the crowd. Yes, absolutely. Again, like they're getting more applications. And I would say there was like a video out by GMAC or MBA.com about this increase. And it's 50% of business schools have seen an increase. So it's not every single business school. So, one, the schools that don't have an increase may be more interested in you and maybe offer more scholarship than they would have in previous years. But then also, it's not every single school that's seeing the rise. So, if you're looking at the statistics and one school has an overwhelming amount and they were on your list, decide, okay, I do want to apply to them. I still want to go there. And it would be amazing. It would be my dream and it would be perfect. But what are some backups or some alternatives? Again, like these schools are the top ranked MBA programs in the world. So they definitely are producing something amazing and worth being part of. So don't count them out, right? Like if they're in the top 25. So, there's definitely some sleeper schools in between, like we could talk about Tuck, Darden, Duke. I think that I really like Cornell, but I think sometimes people don't think about them enough. So, I think that it is important to show that you've done your research and that you're part of this process and you're involved and invested in it. It's not just, oh, the next step in my career is to get an MBA because that's what everybody does when they get to this point. No, I need this MBA and I need it now because it's time for me to take this next step or I'm reaching a ceiling in what I've been able to do or accomplish. And I need the MBA to help me ratchet up the level, like a couple more levels, or I need the MBA to pivot because I'm following this thing that I'm really excited about and passionate about, and I need the MBA to give me X, Y, and Z skills to be able to be successful there. Um, okay, another question. I have a first degree from a non-business background, and for the first 2 years, I was super focused on my career, but have always had a desire for business and entrepreneurship. I want to complete Swift in my career path and have an MBA. How do I show that I'm very enthusiastic and prepared? So I'm not exactly sure what this exactly might entail. I don't know if this means that grades were not as strong as they could have been, or just simply that you took a non business path, which again, MBA admissions committees love because there's businesses in everything, businesses in science, by businesses really everywhere. And so you are representing a small, like somebody who has the least representation in the MBA classroom. It's something that you're going to be able to share about your industry and how things work or what the climate is and give other people perspective. And so they're going to enjoy that. Beyond that, I would say you can always talk about the entrepreneurship and that you're interested in this. However, you felt like you needed to go the scientific route or research route or whatever it might have been to be able to build your skills as you go and be able to make it into, the world of entrepreneurship. All right. So I think I've answered most questions. Again, like if you've got something that I haven't answered, please take the time to email me or set up a time for us to do a profile evaluation. I look forward to meeting you all. And I hope you enjoy the MBA spotlight and have a great day and enjoy the next thing on your list.